This one I have a connection to, and I apparently it's snowflake time. Marianne was on Fox, shocker, and apparently she didn't like the fact that Karine Jean-Pierre made fun of her candidacy, like everyone else is. And it's something about how she's a woman and she's black and she's gay, and so she should know better than to question a woman's ascension to the highest office in the land because we're all part of the great sisterhood or something.
Right, it's a startling number. You think about it. Among Democrats, only 37% think Joe Biden should run again for election. They're looking, that is, almost 2 out of 3, for somebody else, not him. Marianne.
Yeah, I'm in the 37%.
Williamson wants to be that somebody else. She's back in the race to challenge Joe Biden. Back when she ran in the last contest, it was a crowded field. Only the two of them right now as things stand. We assume the president's going to run for re-election. Marianne Williamson, kind enough to join us now. Ms. Williamson, good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Why?
Thank you. If I do say so. This is I just have to say the TV accent when it comes on is rather profound.
Why are you doing this?
I'm doing this because I think there are some things we need to talk about in this country and we need to change. People need health care. People need a way to get educated, to send their kids to college.
A way or a different way? More ways? There are a lot of ways. Which ones do you like and which ones are you going to swap out?
People need a living wage. We need to save the environment for our grandchildren. Things that,
Well, I would like to breathe fresh air if I don't mind. I mean, my kid would too. I don't want to have to wait for fresh air till my grandkids show up. I'm fucking around.
represent, among other things, a healthy middle class, which we had in this country in the 1970s. These things need to be put on the table, and they need to represent the kind of economic U-turn that this country needs. And that
the economic U-turn. See the way things are going right now? We need to be going the other way. The way Joe Biden is going away from what Donald Trump was doing, we need to U-turn to go right.
I would effectuate as president.
I know Bernie Sanders is impressed with you. He says you should give it a good shot. We've heard very little from anyone else. In fact, nothing. It's almost like crickets from everyone else in your party, even the progressive wing that...
I've said a few things, and I know her personally. That's hardly fair.
Supposedly you would appeal to, certainly more than the president. What do you say?
Well, you know, there's this decision made. It's we will not primary Biden. And so everybody who's thinking only about their own career, they're just standing in line and waiting because that's the decision made from on high. I believe in democracy. I believe in elections. I believe in anyone.
Yes, and you're going to believe in it even more because it's not going to work out. It's not happening. Will not at all.
Who feels moved to run for president, putting their ideas out there, submitting their resume, as it were, and their agenda to the American people, and then let the primary voters decide. That's what democracy should mean. Yeah.
Yeah, you mean like they did last time when you didn't chart?
Do you want to debate the president?
Absolutely, I want to debate the president, and I think that he should debate me, given the fact that I am another candidate.
Are you, though?
All right.
I'm the declared one, actually.
All right. You're the only one for the time being here. Do you think others will enter? Because no one seems to be, even with that disaffection for the president among the base, to jump in.
It's a very serious decision whether or not to run for president, and I respect that. And I'm sure a lot of people are thinking very deeply about their own, you know, they're thinking about their careers because they're part of the political machinery. I'm not. So I don't have to worry about any of those things like what will this mean for my future political career.
No, because she is effectively right now the Santorum of the Democrats. That's what this is. I mean, there is no better way, and you can basically you're gonna get free press from Fox News for running against Biden. Are we sure this isn't Madeline Kahn pulling a mother of all punk skits on us? No, we're not.
I think there might be some other people from outside that political machine who jump in. That's, to me, the sort of glory of democracy, that anybody should be out there who feels moved to be out there and give their case, put their piece to the American people.
Right. But don't do it as a Democrat, because you're not really.
You know, the last time you were running, you were talking about love and, you know, the idea
And that kind of shit.
of decency and look after your fellow man. I'm kind of conflating it all. I apologize.
Yeah, it's you or Jesus. I always mix up the whole message, or something about fish and loaves and whatever.
For that. But now there are reports in Politico that you don't practice necessarily what you preach, that you...
Oh, yeah, this is the article about her being mean to staff and having shouting matches. And don't look at me like that, Marianne. Don't look to me for backup about condescending attitudes towards staff.
There are allegations you've been very mean, condescending, actually cruel to staff members, that you have a long history of yelling and screaming at them. They're afraid of you. What do you say?
This is what they do.
Yes, it's what they do. That's why that's the problem with the help, isn't it, Neil?
What they do. These are the hits that they make. Hit pieces come. Mockery from the press secretary.
Hit pieces, like, AKA fake news.
To the president comes. Women on The View. These are the dirty tricks that mean you're rattling someone. Somebody's not happy that you're there.
Or everybody's looking for material and you show up with a pie already on your face. Let's be completely honest here. The idea that this is part of the crab bucket scheme where you're trying to crawl out and the rest of the crabs shake the bucket so that you have to fall back down in and nobody escapes because you're only the ascendant few are allowed. Let's set that aside for a second and understand the ego involved in thinking that when you make a long shot run for the presidency with a history like Marianne has and where she comes from, California, like, hippie spirituality, astrology and long talks about, spiritualism and being on Oprah's book club, talking about A Course in Miracles. You have to expect that rake is there because of where you're coming from. Doesn't mean you can't overcome it. Doesn't mean you can't walk around it, or that it should in any way disqualify you from being able to do it. If Orange, if the mango monkey can, say he grabs women by the pussy and still end up being president, obviously anybody with Marianne's history spiritually can get past that with the voters and get a shot at being elected. The problem is that you are ice skating uphill against that, and to think it's the system against you, to think it's like, oh, they're just afraid of me, that's why they don't want it. No, you're just fucking hilarious. That's the truth. That's the biggest ego aspect of all this shit, and the part I find the most irritating. This is not about the democratic system fearing the impact that Marianne Williamson will have on the electorate or the message. It's that, on the one hand, she serves up exactly what Fox wants, which is a secondary attack on Biden, but has no value to the average voter. That's the problem. And with it, this kind of egoish idea that, well, I did it, I've been on Oprah's book club. I deserve a shot. Not everybody deserves a shot, so why not? But excuse me, don't you know who I am? Neil. That's what this comes across as. This is not and again, this goes into that like deep state establishment bullshit that we keep hearing as an excuse for why people, get pushback socially from the world at large. Ugh.
Somebody feels threatened by the conversation that you're bringing.
No, they don't. They don't feel threatened by the conversation you're bringing up. The conversation you're bringing up is absurd at its face in terms of interpolitics in the Democratic Party. And the only reason you get FaceTime on Fox is because they're counting on you to shit on Democrats and shit on Joe Biden. That's what that's your gig. That's your job now. And by the way, they're going to bring up, Cavuto's going to bring up that Politico piece, or they're going to bring up your, the like hippie free love, blah, blah, blah. And when they're bringing those things up, it isn't because, well, in balance, this is just the history that you have or what people are saying, like we cover a news story. They're doing that to make sure you don't get any headway. If there's any kind of setup here, if there's any coordinated effort to make sure you go no further than just being an anti-Democratic Party gadfly for Fox News, it's that. It's them saying, set her up and shut her down. Set her up and shut her down. And then invite her back on, because she absolutely will come here.
Yeah. So this is what happens in politics, and
I certainly understand that, but they do quote a few people. You're quite right. Quite a few of these were not identified. But this,
have you noticed that?
But this poor Paul Hodes, the former congressman, who had said that, this is consistent with my observation, quoting him, and consistent with behavior I have seen. What do you say?
I could talk about Paul Hodes' behavior, but I'm not going to go there. If anybody has ever felt that I was not respectful to them who worked for me, then I am sorry.
I accept your apology. And so does Chud, apparently. Hold on. 1 second. Chud, Hi, can I help you? Oh. No. Okay. She's sprier than she used to be since her surgery, so she just took off. That's great. She's moving around. Yay.
But I also know that this is a hit piece. I think any time that...
All right. If you drive your car into a tree, you hit the tree. And a hit was involved in the striking of your car to the tree. But the tree did not hit you. Now, a piece of your car hit the tree, so that was a hit piece. That said, you don't blame the tree.
Somebody criticizes you, you always have to ask yourself, is any of it true? Is 10% of it true? If 10% of it is true, then I want to correct that within myself and within my behavior. But that's not what's going on here. Do I?
You're right. It's more like 42%.
I have some things to learn from any experience, including that one. Absolutely. But I also think that people can see through the obvious game that's being played here.
No, they can't. No. Because again, you come across as a gadfly, as the Santorum of the Democratic Party, and you're condescending towards anyone who thinks that you might have a longer row to hoe than other people who've been in government before, especially after we've just had somebody who ran as I'm outside the system and fucked up the whole world.
By establishment forces who don't want me in the game.
Establishment. There it is. Outrageous.
Some people put it out there, including the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, who made a
You don't have to say her whole
number
name.
of snide references about you. I just want you to respond to this.
Is the president annoyed, frustrated with Marianne Williamson for jumping in the race ahead of him? Did he want a clear field to run against the Republican nominee in 2024?
Just not tracking that. I mean, if I had a what is it called, a little globe here, crystal ball, then I can tell you. But I imagine 8-ball, whatever. If I could feel her aura, I just don't have any. I just don't have anything to share on that.
What did you think of that?
I thought it was a good joke. Can she feel my aura? This is about my aura, isn't it? It's been on the fritz. I need new batteries.
What I thought of that is, first of all, she's not tracking that. You-know-what, she's not tracking that. Obviously she is. Those were not spontaneous remarks. I've written 15 books. I've given thousands of lectures. No one will see anywhere that I have said or written anything about crystal balls or about auras. I write books about...
Right. That's not... All right. And by the way, I've been to hundreds of her lectures. It is not an absurdity to bring up any of those things.
Religious, spiritual themes at the heart of all the great religious teachings of the world. And I think given the deep religiosity and spirituality of the majority of Americans, you might want to be careful mocking that.
No. She's not. when you mock crystal balls and magic 8 balls and auras, Catholics, Christians, Jews, and Muslims are not going to start pearl clutching.
You know, I agree there. I mean, you're very profound on a politics of love comes to mind, where you raise issues that maybe a lot of candidates, a lot of people in general, don't share during a campaign. But the idea when you ran last time is that you were caught off guard, that you were flippant, that you're making up for it now by really getting down and studying a lot of these issues. Do you regret the way things started in that last campaign?
Well, I think the issue that you bring up, the point is what you just said, when they started. I think when people actually came to hear me speak last time, I was speaking about serious issues then, but because, you know, the debates were kind of early, I was nervous. I made a couple of, you know, I gave ammunition to those who wanted to oppose.
Yes, you did.
By sounding kind of silly with a couple of things I said. Although I also said some very serious things in those debates about all kinds of issues as well. But when people actually came to...
Yes, well, Neil put his pants on with the front part forward today, but that doesn't mean he gets to walk a runway.
Hear me? The issue was take something silly that she said, use it to create fairy dust so people won't even come hear her.
Don't say fairy dust. Now they're going to say, now next week, Karine Jean-Pierre is going to start going, I don't know, if I had some fairy dust and...
But if you look at my website from last time and you look at my...
Oh, you mean the one I talked you into buying the URL for when you thought I was nuts?
Actual talks last time, I was talking about serious issues then. Now I think people are hearing me. That's the main difference because...
Well, Fox viewers are.
To be honest with you, Neil, I'm not talking any more seriously now than I was talking then.
That's true.
I was just seen in certain situations early in the debate, all of that. You know, they'll take one viral moment when you go cringe, and then that turns a lot of people. It's a deflection technique.
Excuse me, by the way, can we just understand that Joe Biden, the gaffe machine, is president right now? That the ability to not be cringy in those moments after a while, to develop that skill when your habit maybe even in that direction is part of the gig.
You're going to get a lot more scrutiny as a result because clearly you are preparing for this very differently. But, you know, you are an unabashed and unapologetic progressive. You are looking for a single-payer health care system, paid leave, parental leave, free child care, tuition-free public and vocational schooling, $1 trillion.
Sounds good. Great.
Dollar in reparations to Black Americans. How are you going to pay for all of that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Right now, take something like healthcare alone. University of Massachusetts at Amherst has just come up with a study that says over the next 10 years, it would actually save us $5 trillion to have Medicare for all. We now pay about roughly 18.3% of our GDP goes into health care. If you look at countries that actually have universal health care, which is every other advanced democracy, look at Germany, look at Canada, maybe 10%, maybe 15%. The question is, how do we not afford to? Look at what we are paying in health care now. We have an $88 billion medical debt. 1 in 4 Americans are living with medical debt. 68,000 people every year dying for lack of health care.
You're quite right about all of that, but it's the idea of paying for it up front to get going, right? I mean, do you want to tax the rich? Do you want to surcharges? How are you going to? Because that's just part of it. There's a lot more. I mean, what do you do?
Well, first of all, we spent trillions of dollars in Afghanistan and Iraq, which were obviously spectacular failures. And the first question people were asking was not how are you going to pay for it. Yes, we should have a fairer taxation, particularly for the very, very rich. We should get rid of these corporate subsidies.
What is a fair taxation? No, I'm sorry, Ms. Williams. What is a fair taxation? Okay. What's a fair amount for the rich to pay?
I would not have a problem with a wealth tax. I would not have a problem. If you have $50 million in the bank, I don't have a problem with you paying 2% extra in tax. I don't have a problem with that. And if you have $1 billion in asset and we ask for 1% on top of that, that's not even going to affect your day. So, you know, we had a 2017 tax cut, $2 trillion.
By the way, there is, for the record, adding 1%, I don't know, to the tax burden of billionaires or people who make $1 billion a year, a 1% raise or a 2% raise. What was the amount that she said on the first one?
As an asset, and we ask for 1% on top. I don't understand. I don't have a problem with you paying two. You have people. If you have $50 million in the bank, I don't have a problem with you paying two.
So if you have $50 million in the bank, two more percent. I don't know, on that amount, like we're just going to tax 2% out of that 50 that you've already made, you've already paid taxes on, you've accumulated or whatever. 2% of that and 1% of every billionaire is not going to pay for Medicare for all. The only serious way you could pay for that kind of program massively on a country as big as the United States, I believe, is a 5% surcharge on all stock transfers, for example. Like you pay a sales tax on all stocks that cost more than $10 a share. And that factors into it. Buying or selling at 5 cents for every stock over $10. Whether you buy it or sell it, when you buy it or sell it, it would effectively be, it would slow down the day traders. It would steady the stock market and get people, more apt to be in long form investing. And the amount of money generated by that would overwhelm the amount of money that you could shave off the 100,000 billionaires in the country in one fell swoop that would not pay for a system that big.
2% extra in tax. I don't have a problem with that. And if you have $1 billion in asset and we ask for 1% on top of that, that's not even going to affect your day.
That also doesn't mean anything. 1% on top of that, it's all right.
So
yeah, it also, yes, they'll hide more of it offshore.
We had a 2017 tax cut, $2 trillion, 83 cents went to the highest earners and the richest corporations. Why is it, Neil?
But everyone got that tax cut, right? Everyone got that.
Hold on.
Now, the president limits it? I'm sorry, I just want to be clear. I want to limit the 400,000 and over group. That's what the president says. He's targeting. Anyone beneath that, below that, will not have to worry about paying a penny more in tax. How do you feel about that?
I feel he's absolutely right. Nobody. The middle class tax cut, in the 2017 tax cut, the middle class tax cut was a good idea. So while I would wish to repeal the tax cut on the highest earners, the middle
So the Biden plan.
tax
Then
cut
how
was a
do
good
you
idea.
differ?
And the
Then
middle,
how do you differ from President Biden, the man you're trying to topple for the nomination?
He's old and white, and he rides bicycles.
What is he saying
I haven't ridden a bicycle, Neil, since I lived in Montecito.
that you are not want to do
I'm kidding. She didn't even ride a bike then.
that he's not doing?
Okay. The president approved yesterday the Willow Project, which is a massive fossil fuel extraction plan in Alaska. I would cancel that the first day. I want universal health care like in every other advanced democracy, and the president has said that he would veto a Medicare for all bill if it came to his desk. The president has said that he wants to make pharmaceutical drugs cheaper, a few of them. Like I said, I want universal health care. I want actually what...
Yeah, but that won't make the drugs cheaper. If we have universal health care, effectively the government is the payer of first resort, in this situation. That the government ends up being the single payer, the primary purchaser of those kind of things under that system. Ultimately, you are not going to lower the price of prescription drugs that way. You would have to have separate legislation to do it.
They have in every other advanced democracy, whether it has to do with universal health care, paid family leave. I want to raise the minimum wage. You have one-third
So you want to go
American
further than
workers.
this president did, even as a vice president working with Barack Obama on so-called Obamacare. You want to go way beyond that, correct?
I want universal health care like they have in every other advanced democracy. You don't have people die. Look at insulin alone. Look at how many millions of Americans are rationing their insulin.
Yeah, they're already fixing that. That will be an issue before there. Hold on. Hold on. Let me, yeah. Now, the biggest problem with Medicare for all versus a single payer system is that you will have to, and this is where they called it death panels, but ultimately that's not the case. It's where you have to ration the available physicians and nurses and facilities because you just do not have enough for the people who will need them, especially when it comes to elective surgery, which we saw during the pandemic. And this is Australia. A ballooning number of people waiting for elective surgery needs to be addressed. And that's, by the way, that's knees, shoulders, that kind of, stints that doctors think can wait. It's a lot of stuff. Needs to be addressed urgently with extra funding and reforms, the Australian Medical Association says. If no action is taken by all levels of government, the number of people waiting for elective surgery is expected to be more than 500,000 by 30th of June. The wait times on like knee surgery and the like in the UK and in Australia can balloon to 6 years. 6 years with your bum knee breaking down, your hip, whatever, those kind of things. Again, if you're going to do this, you have to be all in. You have to do this on such a level that you fund the expansion of medical schools. You increase the number of available doctors and facilities. You increase the orthopedic surgeons in the country through a, almost, post-World War II advanced plan. You have to do these things. It's not enough to just go, now we'll pay for it instead of you paying for it. Now it'll come out of the taxpayers instead of it coming directly out of your payment, and we're gonna price fix all of these things. We do not, and we learned this during the pandemic, we don't have enough hospital beds. We don't. That kind of thing. You're going to have to fund that beyond the system you're going to have to pay for it directly. Because it's going to be Medicare for all. If you have a single payer system, it can expand and contract as needed. But you can't do it with a Medicare for all system immediately. You can't. That's why you want to go from the ACA to single payer to a full universal system. It's a transition period. You're going to have to do that, or you will not have the facilities and people will wait for fucking years. Yeah.
18 million.
By the way, she nor he are ever going to have to wait a single second for an affordable medical procedure, ever. She's a multimillionaire. I don't know if he's a millionaire, but he's definitely rich and has Fox insurance. They don't have these kind of problems. It's an abstract.
Americans cannot afford to fulfill the prescription.
What the word transition terrifies right-wingers, though? Well, I know, because they think it's a slippery slope, and that's how they try to go against it. And that's the all-or-nothing crowd. They praise the all-or-nothing crowd. It's one of the other reasons they're having her on, too, is that Medicare for all is an absolute non-starter for over 50% of the country. Even when people have medical debt and all that kind of stuff, because they look to, the minor things that you come up across, or like if you have a heart attack or some things like that, we should be able to handle. But if you have long form cancer or other stuff like that, the treatment systems in those countries can run dry on you or drag out and are not responsive the way they are in the United States and haven't been. And that's why rich people from the UK or Australia or Canada will often come to the United States for treatment, because the facilities here, even in the situation where, because of the amount of medical debt we've accrued as a country, because we pay out of pocket or we have direct insurance, that has necessitated the need for the creation of places like St. Jude's and others, and that has actually created more treatments and more available facilities than they have in other countries. So again, if the goal is, and I think it should be, universal availability of medical treatments when you get sick or injured, you're not going to jump straight to it. And especially in a country like ours, because it will take one cycle with a Republican president, or like, if we think it's safe, look at Roe v. Wade. If we think Medicare for all is set up and safe, and then people are like, well, it's the law, we're not going to change any of it, it's untouchable like Social Security, and then Republicans or people like them are leaning that direction, get in there. All they got to do is shiv the shit out of it, and suddenly it becomes untenable, and people start clamoring that they can't see a doctor anymore, and the whole thing falls apart. And then the spike in costs goes through the fucking roof.
That their doctors give to them. You don't have this happening in other advanced
I understand.
democracies.
So, you're going to hear critics who are saying you're going to break the bank. We have huge deficits, debt that's piling up. We're in the middle of
Yes, a third of it was caused by Trump in particular.
fiscal crunch as we speak. Banks are in great disarray, and you're going to tax it all the more. They say
You know
bad
what I'm
timing.
gonna do?
What do you say?
My response to that is that there are equally legitimate arguments that say if people have universal health care, if people can go to college, if we get rid of these college loan debts, if we have a higher minimum wage, this will actually stimulate the economy. There is just as good an argument that this will stimulate the economy. So this austerity way of just making it easier for those who already have to get more and harder for everybody else to even make it is not giving us the thriving economy that some of them would like to make us believe. The American people know better. The visceral experience of the American people is that 80% of Americans are struggling to hold on.
All right. We'll watch it very closely. You do bear watching. Marianne Williamson, thank you very much.
Thank you for saying that in our moment of ego. Now, for the record, most of what you're going to see her on Fox like crazy. Are you going to see her on MSNBC? Maybe once or twice over the next little bit, because they're going to kind of have to give her some time. If her campaign has any legs at all, they will complain about the lack of time she's getting from CNN or MSNBC. Now, MSNBC and and CNN will push back that she gets plenty of time on Fox. And if people want to see her, it's not like they can, the fairness doctrine doesn't exist and blah, blah, blah. But she could definitely cry foul and get on those places. The problem is she's going to get pushback in the differentiation between what she actually wants to accomplish or can accomplish through legislation, when none of this stuff is ever going to hit. You can't executive order Medicare for all, for example. And so, again, you're going to have to do this in mitigatory steps. This is what Biden and Obama knew. This is what Biden has been pushing for. This is why they think it's creeping communism. That's why Trump keeps saying socialism and communism and socialism and communism. And the reason he's saying this is because any incrementalism he thinks is moving us towards communism, because he's fucking stupid. But the point is, that's the only way you can make this kind of giant legislative change. The only reason, the UK was able to install a national health service is because they've basically been bombed back to the 1400s during World War II. They had no choice. They had no system set in place for a normal functioning healthcare after, the London had been strafe bombed for years. So the United States, having not been through that and having a substructure that actually functions most of the time the way it's supposed to, has made shifting changes, and there's been a big push by the healthcare industry and a big push by the insurance companies to put a big smiley face on insurance, and they're doing outreach all over the place. People who have insurance through their employer or through their union pushed back hard on the ACA initially, and now it's they've recognized that it's not it's not going to eat on anything. As a matter of fact, it buoyed up what they were getting, but they're going to push back against Medicare for all. Whereas as a single payer of choice, I personally think that a single payer system and an interstate one, meaning states set up their interstate, their individual state single payer systems, where you get the Washington State healthcare plan or the Massachusetts one like they have, which was the bones of Obamacare, or what they called Romney Care for a while. If you could buy into that from another state, the state benefits because it's not really a profit-making situation. You could use it towards infrastructure. You could use it to expand your schools and do all kinds of stuff like that. And if you don't like what a state is doing with it, you could move your funds someplace else. Fuck Massachusetts. They cut funding to teachers, or they're being assholes to trans kids or whatever. So I'm going to sign up for the California single payer system instead of a single federal one that someone like this dickhead could kneecap. Because anytime somebody talks about like Medicare for all being set up as a primary situation without, by the way, you have to for Medicare for all to work, you have to outlaw private insurance. Because if it's an option, the Republicans can drive people to that option, and they will. Because on a state level, they will deny funds. And on a federal level, if they get in any position of power, they will fucking kneecap it. You have to think, because these people aren't just against it just to be dicks. They're against it for a myriad of reasons. Some of it is financial. They just are buddies with insurance companies, and they're buddies with pharmaceutical companies, and they're buddies with medical associations, and they golf with doctors and dentists and shit like that. And they don't want it to ever shift into those profits and lower the impact of those companies, because they rely on it both to get elected and interpersonally for their own business. And then there's a bunch of them who believe that, like, fuck them, you can't save everybody, and the whole thing's based on just people will smoke and drink and they won't exercise and all this shit, and taxpayers will be funding people's lethargic lifestyles. That is a huge section of the pushback against Medicare for all in and amongst people across this country. It just is. And again, the idea that, people who don't pay any taxes, people who are, below the tax level, who are poorer, this is what they think, being able to be lazy and do drugs and whatever, and then we've all got to pay when they end up in the hospital through Medicare for all. That's the non-starters. You're not going to be able to move the legislation past those fucking people. Not in one fell swoop. It is not going to happen. So the question is, if your goal is ultimately that, or your goal is ultimately that you believe you can lift everybody up past this point, you've got to have a multi-tiered approach, like a fucking adult. I don't know why he's pointing at me, but because he knows I'm right. But you have to have a multi-pronged approach to solving the problems that are around and of healthcare, education, and other stuff, clean water, a good functioning food system, all that stuff, along with what I believe is, and I've said this before, and I don't know why it took me this long, quite frankly, to kind of put it into words like this, but I don't believe healthcare is a right, because no one who gets cancer has their rights violated by a disease that is eating them up. It is part of life. Disease is a part of life. I believe healthcare is a responsibility, both on your own part and on the part of society. And this is how I think it plays out. You as an individual have a responsibility to be as healthy as you possibly can be within the limits of your belief system, your philosophy about your life. If you think your humanity has worth, you have a responsibility to eat better, moderation in your imbibing, not smoking, whatever, anything that you can do to make your system healthier. You have a responsibility to do that, because there's only so many doctors, there's only so many nurses, there's only so much insulin, there's only so much drugs that are out there, and whatever you take, someone else doesn't get. This is closer to zero sum when it comes to medication and people treating you, right? So you have a responsibility to do the best you can, so that if you do end up, God forbid, in the hospital or with some sort of long form disease, it's not because you did it, it's because life happens, and it absolutely does. And the same thing is true of people who cannot help it. In those situations, when someone is affected by a disease or an accident, or something happens to them that they have no control over, and they do not have the resources to deal with it, I think it's the responsibility of a functioning civil society like the United States to make sure that person gets through it as best they can, or deals with it in as much comfort as is possible if it's a permanent thing. What if you're born with birth defects? That's exactly right. You have no responsibility to a birth defect. It's something you have. So I think the society has a responsibility as human, just in our humanity, towards people who have birth defects or cancers that they got, not because they smoked cigarettes or whatever. And again, I believe in treating people if they got cancer, however they got it. But the point is, if you got it because of the rivers and streams were fucked up because of a factory up the river or some cancer cluster that you were born into, that's not your responsibility. At 9 years old, you couldn't yell at your family, I don't give a fuck about your job, Dad. I don't give a fuck about your job, Mom. I'm going to get cancer in 3 years. We have to move. Like, there's no way you can do that. So we as a society have a responsibility to help people in that situation, while at the same time taking as much responsibility about our interpersonal relationships and our health of our own bodily autonomy and our health there as we possibly can, so that we are never, and this is an ethical thing that I'm talking about. You can't legislate this. This is something that humanity has. That's why I call it a responsibility as opposed to a rule or a law or something like that. And that is, it's important to the conversation. And you will not move forward in a universal system in the United States until you invest in that mentality to some degree. Flang Doodle thinks it's word salad. I don't think so. I think there's two primary things. I think those work very well. So no more fish delights. I would agree. Yes, that's true. What about the companies making profits off of those chemicals? The chems? You mean the drugs? Well, I would argue, what are they doing with the profits? I mean, some people invested. So are they going to invest in this, in the next big cure to something if they need the money to make something like that? If they don't get a return on their investment worldwide? We're not talking about money that's just inside the United States or anywhere else. Where's it going? Where's it coming from? Stockholders, people who buy into it, people with retirement plans, unions, that's who invests in these things. Would you invest in a pharmaceutical company that doesn't have a successful treatment for something? That's part of it. That's, so the profits from that, if it's just the CEO getting a golden parachute, I think you've got a really good argument for a farcical economic system going on in that pharmacy. But if you're talking about, giant pension funds, one of their investments is in Moderna or Pfizer or something like that, and they expect a return on their investment, either in rising stock prices or in dividends specifically, then there's a reason why they would want that company to be successful. At a certain point, it would seem to me, in a lot of these cases where a company that just makes drugs that prolong the disease is always, if they were the only company in the world, there's an argument that they would just want treatments and no cure. But if any other company can actually go, hey, by the way, we cured this and there's no cure for this other thing, but we do have a treatment that can help you with this thing. And you can trust us because we cured that other shit that these guys were just keeping you on the tit forever. That's the competition that goes on amongst pharmaceutical companies. I think I came across a vault and fault that ran the achievement-based experience. I agree with you. Your second point first half worries me. Responsibility, merit-based society can lead to inbreed mental illness of bias. Well, no, I'm talking about specifically an individual ethic and then a societal respect for human life. Those two primary things have to be fomented, I believe, if that makes sense, because you are in a community an individual. And so I believe ethically, morally, intellectually, to the best of your capability, you have to live up to your highest standard as often as you can, without stressing yourself out to the point where you make yourself sick. That's always, I'm talking about genuine balance. But you have to have a responsibility for your own life so that there is room for people who are not responsible for theirs. Does that make sense? And when you do that, when that's part of the greater culture, you could pass Medicare for all in one session. Because people would go, yeah, I'm not going to take advantage of the system and clog it up just for the fuck of it, or eat a bunch of shit and treat my body like garbage and then, roll in there like, and slap the counter and demand service and push my way in front of somebody else in line or gack up the line, because I have a bunch of lifestyle diseases that I could avoid. And that's what's stopping it right now.